All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I believe we're live here. There we go. Today, well, if number one, I should say, if you're new to our series, welcome. If you're not new to our series, welcome back. This is our weekly concert and interview series that we do for the Kareem Candy World Orchestra. And today we have the tremendous pleasure of having the great drummer and composer and educator and world traveler and record label owner, the great John Bishop, is with us today. John, thank you for coming.
Composer, not so much.
No, you're a great improviser, which makes you a great composer.
But all the rest of that sounds great.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Well, it's an honor to have you here. Normally we have someone monitoring things here, but I'll be monitoring things today. So I'm going to interview John as per usual for the first 45 minutes and then open things up for questions. So if you have questions for either John or myself, please don't be shy. And if we don't get to them live, you put them in the comments. We can get to them after the fact as well. So let us know if there's anything we can be of assistance with. So John, quick question. We'll just getting started here. Where did you grow up, and how did you get started in music?
Okay, born in Seattle, Washington. When I was about 7 months old, this is actually good for the story. My parents, my dad got stationed in Germany. He was civilian personnel with the Army, so we immediately moved to Germany for 4 years. So that's where I did my learning how to speak, and which I didn't learn German, but that's where I learned how to be a little human being. And my folks my dad listened to jazz a lot. He had bought Kind of Blue, which had just come out, and so we were listening to that kind of music. There was a lot of traveling around, going to museums, libraries. So us kids, we were lucky. So
whereabouts in Germany are we
lived
at this time?
in Kaiserslautern. Okay. So and then we moved to Washington, D.C. when I was about 5, and then that's where we started. My sister and I started playing music, started string instrument stuff, and then eventually I did a drum thing when I was like 7. Did this little drum corps, and so I lived there a few years. Then we moved to San Antonio, got stationed down there, where I did 5th and 6th grade. And then my dad died, and we moved to Eugene, which is where our family was from. And so Eugene, from junior high school through college, was my main growing thing as far as figuring out who I was.
Which is a great city. I mean, it's a college town, right? The University of Oregon, and they from what I know about it now, and in the past it had a pretty good jazz scene. Was that true at the time when you were growing up?
Oh yeah. No, it was great. It was great. And if you want to go back to learning music and getting all that stuff together, yes. When we were in Washington D.C., I had a neighbor lived right behind us who joined this drum corps thing. And so I joined with him, and we went and did that, and that was run by this sergeant in the Army. Yeah. And it was just a great thing of learning basics, rudiments, and in probably the second week I was doing it, he brought in Joe Morello to do a clinic. It was going to be Gene Krupa, but Gene couldn't make it out. So, 7 years old, and you're kind of this dynamic thing. And at the same time, this other neighbor 3 doors up, he was much older. He was probably 13, and he was a drummer, and he had a band. And so I heard them play at a school thing once. They were playing like Mustang Sally, and I eventually, figured it out that I could go down and play his drums for $1. Yeah. And so I'd just sit down and bang around, not really knowing what I was doing. But then he'd come in and sit down, and they'd do things like, so Wipeout? So I'd have to play Wipeout. Yeah. And so you just had this kind of, this kind of get your stuff together, starting when I was 7.
Mentorship and not bringing the bar lower, but bringing you up to the bar, it sounds like. Yeah. Good.
Yeah. So as I think of it, I think I had that theme throughout my growing period, which is still going on now, which is like that thing of somebody being around to go, why'd you do that? And, just having that sort of thing. Anyway, so I got a little snare drum and a cymbal, and I'd play along, and I had friend, and we played guitar and that. We were 7, 8, 9 years old. Moved to San Antonio, and it was more of the same of developing that, but deciding that, I don't know where the drums came from, but I think there was something about when I heard records, I liked that thing of creating this bed of crap. As opposed to being like a guitar player or a singer or something. It was just like creating this thing, this noise. Just seemed great. So I think that was my general thing of getting me into practicing and just doing was.
Well, out of, you mentioned your father had Kind of Blue. Do you recall any other records that kind of stuck out in your mind, or did you even like Kind of Blue? And the reason I ask this is because my father used to listen to, at the time when I was a kid, KPLU, and I hated jazz as a kid. I mean, he wasn't knowledgeable about jazz at all, and no one in my family was. That all came later. But I really didn't like the music that my parents listened to. So you did enjoy
Well,
jazz.
this came from like day one. So it wasn't like we had our life at school and you'd come home and your parents would be watching Lawrence Welk or something. This was like, it's just growing up. It's just every day. You hear, he had, the records that I remember most distinctly were Kind of Blue, just because that was, it just came out, and it was, and I think he played it a lot. So we had Cannonball Adderley album, Them Dirty Blues, great one. And then there's Billie Holiday and J.J. Johnson, and there were a bunch of, he had some like Mississippi blues things, and so just this general sound. And we had a big Grundig and had lots of records that, so it was just this everyday.
Well, and you had the opportunity to be around Joe Morello. Most 7-year-olds. Were you aware of who Joe Morello was at the time? Were you familiar with his body of work? Or?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, that was way more, like Take 5 was, top 10 pop record. So there was and like Gene Krupa and all that stuff, you just kind of knew that they existed and that they were. It would be like Louis Armstrong or any of that. All those guys were like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. Perfect. So then we talk about Kind of Blue and Jimmy Cobb. And were you aware of any drummers that kind of like were drummers that you really liked and wanted to model your playing around at that time, or you just kind of enjoyed everything?
No, it was just drums and just doing, just you just get moving with stuff, just get whacking and and that's when I became aware of like. Probably, especially with the neighbor, just pop music and, Mamas and the Papas and the Beatles, and you just get, start hearing that stuff, and that becomes your thing, because, you're, which is a surprising thing now where you have a lot of high school kids who are coming into jazz programs, and they're so in tune with Duke Ellington, and I want to play drums like Sam Woodyard. It's like, that would have never entered our minds back then. It was like, you want a rock band. You want to, it's your peers. It's your people your age. You want to play the music of your time.
Definitely. All right. Well, so we go to San Antonio, and so I'm assuming you're around a group of peers and other musicians there. What was the scene like there? I know they have a long history of musicians there, too. So.
Oh, they do, for sure. But that wasn't really, as far as the structural thing, there wasn't much there. But I had neighbors who were, into playing. There was just kind of activity where some neighbors would play guitar or something. And so there would just be jamming, just, pointless, kind of not good, but just kind of screwing around, thinking of stuff. And you'd hear Creedence on the radio. And I went with this one family to a hootenanny kind of thing. And it's like, Merle Haggard and Johnny Cash, and it's just taking in music, taking in influence, and just, just deciding that that's interesting. Like our family, we didn't necessarily go camping or doing this other stuff. It was just kind of this focus on reading, music, and so that was a focus.
Culture.
Sure. But without that preciousness that can come with, culture. No, most everything was, moving to Eugene was huge, because it started at Roosevelt Junior High School, which was this great place where you got to pick your own classes. There were no grades. And it was just dove in, and the band director was this young, just cool guy. And so we did band, and he would bring people in from the college to, do little clinics and be hanging out. And I had a drum set at that point, so at home I'm sitting there playing in the basement along with stuff and just trying to get my thing together. Wasn't really doing that in school yet, but then I think it was ninth grade probably. Nobody had really heard me play drum set or anything at that point. And finally we had like some tune in band that was called Wonderful Rock Machine. And so we're playing it, and my friend is playing, Rob is playing the drum set on it. And he's just kind of hacking his way through it. And at some point it was kind of like, he's just lost it. So anyway, he got up, I sat down in the middle of the tune, and I finished out Wonderful Rock Machine. And got done with it, and the whole band like rose and turned around and applauded. So it was like, okay, career is set. It was something like that.
Well, so in Eugene at that time, things are starting to come together. Middle school, and you said you went to high school in Eugene as well, correct? Pre-college. All right. When you got to high school, was there much of a jazz program? Were there clubs around the area?
Oh yeah, it was great. Yeah,
okay.
Everything was like, it was the infrastructure of all of it was just really slick and easy and cool. It was kind of like being in Seattle now and going through, or a few years ago, going through Washington Middle School with Nat, and then being sent over to Clarence, and then from there you're off to, it's just this whole thing that's set up for just making things work well.
A musician incubator.
Yeah.
Well, so what were there any clubs of note that you can recall at that time in Eugene that you used to go maybe listen to artists coming through town or play? So what were some of the venues?
Well, so before that, in high school, we actually had the big band was really good, and our band director was real cool, like tough, and but just some really talented kids. And so some of us would just go to the band room and practice during the day, skip class, and he would never go, shouldn't you be somewhere else? It was just like, we're just doing this thing. So we actually had, he would, get a call, and we would go off and do a gig in the middle of the day for a corporate event or something. And at the same time, there were like clubs around town and just restaurants and hotels that had music. So, 17 years old, and you'd be going and doing a piano trio thing at a restaurant that would also have bigger groups play on weekends. But no, we had the Eugene Hotel, which was great. I saw Art Pepper and George Cable's there, and Art actually couldn't pull it together to come down and play, so it was George. But there were some regulars that came down from Seattle, and other people who came through there, and that was a great place. By the time I got to college, there were probably 5 different rooms that had.
And did you say, I missed this, did you attend the University of Oregon to go to school as well?
Yeah, so basically every junior high school, I'd get to this certain level, and it was kind of, you just got this feeling, the band directors kind of talked, and it was kind of like, oh, okay, well, you'll be going to South Eugene High School, you'll be going into the jazz band, and here's your director. It's kind of like handoff. And then the person who was playing drums there, Henry Van Hoven, he'd be waiting for me, and it wasn't this warm and inviting, but it was kind of set up this way that there would just be this kind of helping hand. So the same thing happened from high school to University of Oregon, where it was like, okay, so here's the handoff. So so I was studying classical percussion and then just playing. Always had some sort of band going on, so we had multiple different. Just every day was full of crap.
Did you know at the time that you wanted to undertake being a musician as a profession? Was that the goal that you had in mind?
It wasn't really a thought. You were just, it was just it. You were doing it already. Like in high school, it was pretty, we were all active, and we were all playing gigs, and I had a regular, for a while there was these brothers, the Robel brothers, and they had a family band. And so like through my senior year of high school, we played down at the Country Squire Inn for chain-smoking alcoholics, and we'd be doing Neil Diamond and Barry Manilow and whatever, swing stuff, just, but 4 hours a night, for 5 nights a week. And then I'd also be playing with, there were like 3 piano players, Emmett Williams, old guy from Alabama, and then there was Dick Blake, old guy from wherever. I say old, they were in their 40s probably, but...
Easy.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, and Dick was more of a bebop hard ass, and then Joe Borland was like a smooth, like a lounge kind of player. And so you just get all these different experiences, and then you have your own bands. We had a funk dance band, and then we put jazz groups together and just have things where it was like, this is a band, and we're getting better. We're working on this stuff.
Okay. Well, at that time, coming from such a broad and diverse program that had a lot of, as you say, handing the baton off to the incoming group of students, were there any students or your peers that have continued on with music that are still playing? Anybody that you can recall, or?
Yeah, definitely, because most of them I'm still in touch with. I mean, it was just this thing. Frank Griffith is a great tenor player and plays clarinet and stuff. He teaches, and he's in Liverpool, teaching there. He's been in the UK for years. Richard Smith. There were 3 guitar players that I started with in junior high school and then all the way through. Richard ended up being the youngest head of the studio guitar program at USC when he was 25, and Tom Hines was 1 year younger than me, and he's in LA, has been there for 30 years. Mike Denny was already kind of a savant when he was in junior high school. And he's in Eugene, teaching at University of Oregon, and so all those guys have been around. But there's just many others. Matt Cooper, who is a great piano player, was back then. Just kind of these. They're all just spread out, and
that's good. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
And it sounds like too, aside from being great players, also there's the education element too. So they're still passing the baton on.
Oh
too.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so how did you get from Eugene, Oregon to Seattle? It's not a far drive, but what led you to locate, and was there any place else after Eugene that you went?
Well, yeah, so in Eugene, it was pretty much nonstop. It was nonstop playing. We had a quartet that we were doing. It was a band called Glider. It was just a combo with the university. But the piano player was writing a lot of music, was real good. And Richard Smith was the guitar player, and he was writing a bunch of really hard stuff. So we just did it as a combo, but then we ended up, I was looking back at a calendar not long ago, and it was like, basically we were rehearsing, 3 or 4 days a week at 10 a.m. for a couple hours. And so we had this just mound of original music. So we would be playing around town. We opened up for the Old and New Dreams Quartet. Remember that band? At a place. And David Brenner, big comedian of the time, we'd open for him at some hall. And there's just, this activity. Plus our regular gigs, we'd do 4 nights for a couple weeks at the Eugene Hotel, and just a bunch of stuff going on. So we were recording that. And at the same time, I think it was probably my 3rd year of college, I was thinking it'd be cool to go to like North Texas. So I went down there and auditioned and decided to go there. And then Richard and then this other friend, the bass player in the band, Kevin Dietz, who's still in Portland and a great player. So they said, yeah. So we hopped in my 64 Ford Custom and we drove to Texas and got a place. And like the first 2 days we were down there, got a call from our piano player back in Eugene who said, well, we got a record deal with this. So it was like, well, we just got down here. So how about we stay 1 semester and then we'll come back? Yeah. So, okay, fine. So anyway, we go to our people at North Texas and go, well, here's the story. We're here, but we just got this record deal with our, and so they said, yeah, okay, that's fine. Just come, take the classes, do the thing. You don't have to do any of the year-end you know, that thing of moving on to the next. You just be. Yeah. So it was good. It was very good. So I got in the 5 o'clock and met some people there. So then I was working around Dallas and just doing the same thing, just whacking it out and meeting a bunch of people. It was
Well, that's again for the historical context. That school has had a rich history of many years of great musicians and pumping out great musicians, and a lot of them would go right out on the road with all these other bands. I've heard rumors or stories of Chick Corea would come through and hire his band from students there. So who was in your sphere of influence at that time when you were down there studying?
so. Well, there were like 125 drummers there, and the 1 o'clock was Greg Bissonette. Do you know of him?
I recognize the name.
So he went on to Maynard Ferguson's band, and then he got into playing a lot of rock stuff. So he got in with David Lee Roth's band, and was this mega. And he's been playing with Ringo Starr for 20 years now, but he's a big drum guy. And the guy on the 2 o'clock was Mike Baker, who's just smoking, and he was Whitney Houston's music director for the last 10, 15 years of her life. And anyway, just all these players were, I mean, they were top shelf. And yeah, and most of them I still see out there doing stuff. But yeah, we got down there, and the jazz trumpet player from the 1 o'clock, probably the second week we were there, he got picked up by Woody Herman's band. And so they plugged in Paul Mazio, who lives in Portland. He was a freshman, and they plugged him into the 1 o'clock jazz chair.
I've played a couple gigs with him over the years down there. He's wonderful, wonderful.
Just great.
Okay, well, so and then.
So it was a machine. It was.
Yes.
It was. There was definitely a. It was like, oh yeah, you do well here. Everything's out there for you.
So then you went back and did the record in Eugene, and.
So we went back, and by the time we got back, there was a label back then that was picking up a lot of stuff, but there was some shiftiness. Anyway, we ended up not doing that deal, but we got another. John Hammond, who was a producer for Columbia Records. He got Bob Dylan and Bruce Springsteen and lots of people over the years. Anyway, he took a liking for our piano player's music, and so brought him out there a couple times and gave us some money to do some more recording. And he was setting us up to do a deal with Columbia, and that week is when the whole thing blew up, and they fired like all their top A&R people. And so anyway, he said, but just hang out, we'll get something going. Never did, but anyway, it was just a cool little experience of like, that's one of those things where like people, when they're younger and they get together and they play, and they think, oh yeah, we've got our little thing, but I'm still moving forward. Sometimes when you have your little thing, it can actually be the thing. It can be a thing that's real. I would have never imagined being in college and having this little college combo and then have John Hammond go, oh, here's some dough. We like where this is going. I actually want to sign you. I can't, but I want to. I mean, that's a huge step from just being a bunch of knuckleheads. So I think that's one of the problems with school right now, with music schools, is that they're telling you, here's the track. You come in, 4 years later, that's when you graduate. Better, 4 years graduate, master's degree. And then you're off in the world. When music doesn't work like that, music is made. Music is done. It's just dive in. If you have an idea, it's worth something. It can be worth something. Even if it's not worth something, do it. Do your ideas.
Well, this is a great segue going right into, I want to talk about Origin Records, and
Yeah.
the time, we always run out of time. There's so many things to discuss, but aside from Origin, and I do want to do that again. Maybe have to do a couple of these things here, but I'd like to talk about still you and your music and your path that led you to who you are now. So, still in Eugene, Oregon, North Texas. Again, what happened after that?
So this is all of that stuff is good if I explained it correctly, and if I really told the story well. What being old and thinking back, I just find these little moments where it's like, oh, that kind of is what made me not worry about this or that, or I think figuring out that this is process. It's not reaching something and then, oh, I'm there, I'm at this. So it's just thinking of those little baby steps. But about like Origin and how maybe one of those things that led to that was, when I went to the University of Oregon, Jim Reinking was the drummer in the band at that time, just great player. And but the other thing he did was he went and got onto the student activities committee for the university. So when I was in high school, he was playing in the band, but also on that thing. So he brought to the university Jack DeJohnette's special edition. He brought Art Blakey. He brought Billy Cobham and Weather Report. And so all these things that I went to, and it was like, so by the time I got there, it was kind of like, oh, that's what you do. It's like you've just entered this city of 40,000 people, this university. You are the drummer for this university. You're part of the thing that decides on what's culture going to look like. What should it look like? And here's this guy, and he took his role as drummer of the campus, and he will help people learn about stuff, help them have a cultural awareness. So it just seemed like, oh, that's what you do. So I went and I interviewed for doing that role, and I wasn't as good as him, I guess, at yapping, so I didn't get it. But there was still that thought process of, oh, you just help things along. Yeah. It's not just you playing your instrument, it's making things set for everybody else. Yeah. From his doing that thing, he brought in B.B. King one time, and then I got a note to, they wondered if they could rent my drums. So, yeah, sure, show up, have my drums there backstage, and hanging out, and there's this gospel group from Mississippi who's opening the show. It's like a 20-piece thing. Anyway, we're hanging out, and somebody comes back to me and said, "Those your drums?" It's like, "Yeah." You go, "Our drummer can't make it. Can you come out and play with us?" It was like, I don't know, what are you playing? It's just gospel. It's like, oh, okay. So so went out there, and it was like, I'm talking to the bass player and going, so just any help you can give me, like the first tune. He goes, it's like a gospel thing. It's like, alrighty. So anyway, went out, and then they started playing, and it was like, it's a gospel thing. So it's 12/8. So it's a a room of 1,200 people, and B.B. King's band is on the things, and I'm put in this position. It's like that's all from Jim going and making this stuff happen. Otherwise, I'd just be in the practice room doing that thing.
But you were also ready when opportunity presented itself too, right?
It helped that so much stuff was going on back then that it wasn't a big step. So that thing of just keep moving, keep moving. Everything that comes up, you just do. And then you just find yourself playing a lot, which is what you're supposed to be doing when you're 16, 17, 18, 19. You should just be playing every day and making new connections with people, and you just see where they go.
Okay, so after you're kind of North Texas, University of Oregon, and then what happened
Oh,
after?
yeah, that band, that group, Glider, we got a call to do a gig up in Seattle at this club called Chapter 11, right next to the King Dome. Yeah. And it was 4 nights a week for 6 months. Okay. So we said, yeah, and came up, rented a house in Bellevue, and came up and lived there. And so I would, we'd have 3 nights off, and so most of the time I would like drive down to Portland, play a night, drive to Eugene, play a night, race back up here, play the 4 nights, drive down to Eugene, play 3 nights.
You have to be single at this time, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. This wouldn't fly.
Yeah, don't be an idiot. Yeah. I mean, no, it was just full of movement and yeah. So, no, so that's where I first got a sense of Seattle is, we came up and, so the first night I go down and there's like a Cornish and there's a concert. So I go over there and there's Gary Peacock and Jim Knapp and Dave Peterson and Art Landy. Yeah. And it's just really creative, stunning stuff. And it's like, oh, this is a good town, yeah. It seems like. Yeah. So every night I'd be going and hitting jam sessions were going on. There were a bunch of things going on.
What time period is this? Where are we now?
1981.
Okay. So what were there's I was born in 78, and when I came on the scene it was a little bit different. What were the clubs around at the time where you were doing this and going to see sessions and play?
So Jazz Alley was over in the U District, and it was just a little joint. It was it was not what it is now, yeah. But they did bring in everything. So, yeah, it would be Dexter Gordon for 5 nights, yeah. And then Parnell's was over in Pioneer Square. Mm-hmm. So it would be Dexter Gordon at Jazz Alley and Cedar Walton at Parnell's.
It's a tough choice and a good problem to have.
You do both. Yeah. You do both. Yeah. So that was so yeah, the first week I was here, you'd just go down to Jazz Alley and show up, and half the time there was no cover. And
Jazz Alley?
Yep.
Wow. Was there like a drink minimum or something? And
there was he went through a few different things, but there was a while there where there was no cover, and people would drink and eat. And other than that, like I think Dexter was like $7, and I didn't have the money, so I was outside the window. Yeah. The place was packed, and somebody I was there for an hour and a half, and somebody at some point took and they paid. I got in there and heard that, but that was a regular thing too. You couldn't afford it, or you weren't old enough. You just hang out outside and listen. But what always got me was like I would be the only one doing that, yeah. Which I never understood. Yeah. It was like Dexter Gordon. Yeah. Am I really the only person in this town who's under 21?
Right. Well, at that time, wasn't that band with George Cable's Eddie Gladden and
yeah.
Rufus Reed, right? Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was great. And so I just went down there all the time. And then within a few weeks, it's kind of like they know who you are. And it's like, come on in, and you just find your place.
So then you made I have a couple questions because I know it used to be, bands would be engaged to perform at a club for a week or 2 weeks at a time. Mm-hmm. So I'd never heard of a 4-day-a-week standing engagement for 6 months. Was that fairly common at that time? Really? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, anything went, and lots of places. It was like it was a plus to have music. Yeah. If you had a restaurant, well, why not have a piano player? Yeah. Why not have a trio? Yeah. So there were, I don't. Probably at that point, at any time there were 15 gigs that were just 6 nights a week. It'd be the Red Lion down by the airport, or the Hilton, or the Sheraton, or just on and on and on.
So who was around at that time playing on the scene? Like I know a lot of people from doing these interviews. Floyd Standiford was a big one, and Devon's grandfather, Dave Lewis, was a big one. Anyone else that you can recall?
Well, the ones that I really connected with were those that were just right above me in age, and they're like really old now, so quite old. Yeah, so the first time I went down to Parnell's jam session, Jay Thomas was running it, and it was Chuck Deerdorf and Dave Peterson and Dean Hodges and Dave Peck, Mark Seals, those guys. That was like a core that you would just hear all the time.
The Bud Shank jazz faculty for many years.
Yeah. But for drummers, it was Dean and Denny Gore, Doug Gore, Denny's his piano player brother, Doug Gore and Moise Lucas, who were all just individuals and roasting and just so basically I would hear one or two of those safely every night of the week for a couple of years.
Well, so that question, I'm just kind of going off the rails here a little bit, but coming from Eugene with such a vast opportunities to play, same thing with North Texas, Seattle at that time in the 80s, versus now here we are. And I'm not even talking about pandemic. Let's go back 3 years. Let's talk about the scene 3 years ago and opportunities to play.
It was 9/11. Basically, is what was the border between stuff happening and not so much.
And do you think that's partly, I guess you could look at that both through the lens of the local scene, but also traveling and how it's much more difficult to travel and tour and much more expensive and invasive, particularly with instruments. I'm just curious about your opinions, not only as a musician, but also as someone who produces the Ballard Jazz Walk and brings in headliners and also Origin Records and all these other projects. Because you're not only touring, performing locally and bringing in artists from around the world, but also you have that relationship with, also I wanted to talk about this too, Hal Galper and touring with Hal.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just curious, there's, I guess, many questions in this one question, but what's your opinion about the scene now, I guess, pre-COVID versus 20, 30 years ago? And what any problems with it?
Yeah, it's just a different world. The thing back then was, and you can kind of make up all different excuses like video games and just this technology, but every town you could be on the road and you would drive into some little podunk town and there would be a restaurant lounge and you'd pull in and there'd be a band playing. It's just people were used to just hearing bands, or all through junior high school, college, every dance was a real band. So there'd be a stage with flash pots and a 6-piece band, and everybody was used to hearing music live, and it was a part of life. Civilians wouldn't have to like now civilians listen with earbuds, and it's like, oh, I got these records. I don't know. I got this thing that plays a bunch of music. I like music. But no, like there was this connection with that, having that sound move through the air off of a real instrument, that people were that was just normal. I don't think that's normal anymore, and I think that's probably just the main thing.
I don't have any answers. I played a concert last night on Whidbey Island. It was a small, intimate room, sold out, ticketed, quiet, And the night before, people very appreciative of us having that. The night before, I played at another club, and I'm not going to name names because I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. But they had the ball game on, multiple TVs. And when we started, I asked them, hey, can you turn the sound down? Which they did, and we were playing. And there was someone at the bar who brought in an iPad into the game, and he just cranked the volume on his iPad all the way up. And people still enjoyed it. People still, we got our guarantee and were tipped. But it was just the mentality of that to me, like, different strokes for different folks, I guess.
It's not that it was ideal back in the old days, but because, that's just humans being humans. But just the, I don't know what I was going to say. I had something that was big. But just the thing of like all these rooms just had music, and it was just a thing. It was, and I don't think anything's different now, like as far as people connecting with it, because when you do play and they connect, they really connect, which is what I like about the festival. It's, you know, people show up and it's that experience, because that's what happens when you play music. It's just, you've got these in-between people now that feel that it's not worth spending that extra money for that, you know. They'll spend money for light fixtures and whatever they spend for restaurants and lounges, but that extra for music, which could be pretty cool, but they will never know.
Well, we're almost out of time here. I wanted to specifically talk about your association and long-running standing with Hal Galper and the trio, and also Ballard Jazz Walk and the Origin Festival. We're not going to get to all that, unfortunately, and we're getting to that point. So if anyone has any questions for John or myself, please put it in the comments and let us know. If not, I'm going to keep barraging him with questions here. But so let's talk about with the time that we have here. Can we discuss Origin Records and how that came to be? And
just it came out of the exact same thing as all the rest of that stuff came out of. It was it's finding a place, finding a connection with other artists. It's figuring out what you've got that helps other people and how you utilize it. Not that I think I necessarily help out other people, but that's kind of the impetus of all that. It's like, okay, I've got this skill set. I'm going to hone this. For me, it was I've always tried to talk people into doing stuff. Like I have a few friends who play their instruments great and write great music, and it would be like, you got to make a record. You got to do this. You should be doing this. So I had that thing in me already, and then the thing of designing CD covers, which is basically how that all evolved and turned into something. It was people asking me to do it for their project, and then just having the idea of, oh, well, I should just formalize this on some level. It won't turn into anything. It won't be anything, but I'll just do that. And then here we are. 24 years later. And
well, yeah, you guys have amassed a huge catalog of albums.
I just did number 698 through 702 CDs, sent them off. And so, yeah, we've got like 360 artists and 700 and something records now, 702 exactly.
Well, you're not just throwing stuff out. A lot of these albums are very well respected and receive awards and a lot of plays. So, I mean, you're doing something right, you know.
That would be the point. Yeah, well, it's just the circle of influence kind of goes out quicker when you've got something more than just like me being a drummer. It's like, oh, that's great. Yeah, here's a gig. Having the label, having something to offer, the work that we've done trying to get radio people on our side over the years and media and hooking up distribution and hooking up all the little nuts and bolts. That's of value to people. And then the ones who usually almost everybody on the label comes through somebody else who's already there. So there's this flow of, you know, continuity of sound and concept, and some things come off different from that, but that kind of makes it all the more charming, you know.
Well, after the last 20-some years of producing albums and working with all these great musicians, I'm pretty sure you're going to answer this. Whenever someone asks me what's my favorite or what's the best, I never have that because there's so many different things. But what are some of your favorite memories or favorite projects that you've been associated with through Origin Records over the years?
Well, yeah. No, I think the bigger thing of it was the music is the music. It's going to be there and it's going to take care of itself and do all that. It's like, how can you make the environment for that better? How do you make connections with people that will help out the whole? So I think that's probably where probably all along, that's where the most fun in all this is. It's in those new connections. It's in those, when you get the call from somebody out of the blue that's noticed what it is and appreciates it and wants to be a part of it. Those are the kind of things that keep me going. It's basically the hang, you know.
For people, I'm keenly aware that jazz is 1% of the music industry. I mean, that as much as I hate that phrase, it is what it is. But for people that want to learn more about the record label and find out more about the operations and things in general, where can they go to find out about that?
Originarts.com. Yeah. Yeah. And that 1% thing,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Well, I wanted to ask then, too, I just had a thought and it's completely gone again. Oh, yeah. Your thoughts on the music industry, where it stands now, with regard to Spotify and Apple Music and streaming and all this versus, I guess, I mean, there's many parts to this question, but money that musicians actually make from recording. And I kind of get the sense of what you're going to say. It is about the music and the project and the concept. But what are your thoughts about the artists being compensated for their time and their concept fairly?
Oh, well, that's a complete joke. But so I think the big misnomer or whatever, that's the music industry. Yeah. Spotify and Apple and all that is not the music industry. That's the tech industry that's posing as a music delivery system. Yeah. They're not a delivery system. They're a data collection. Those are all data collection agencies, and they're building billions. Not, have a good time doing that. Yeah. I think the main thing, the main problem that we've got as musicians is buying into propaganda, like Coca-Cola makes you have good friends, and McDonald's is really fun. We're buying into that same propaganda with Spotify and all that stuff as like, well, this is the music business. This is the way it goes. You release digitally and you crank it out, and this is where it's at. It's like, well, there's nothing there. There's absolutely nothing there. I think as long as musicians understand that it's their curiosity, it's their reaching for things that keeps all of this going, that keeps the thing going. When a kid listens to Spotify, when he listens to a Miles Davis track on Spotify, he hears a sound. When he gets the CD or the LP of a Miles Davis record, he knows the storyline, he knows who's playing on it, he knows the years, he knows the dates, he knows this array of information that he needs or she needs, that Spotify, digital, you're just wasting your time. That's for amateurs. For people who really care, they need that knowledge base. You need to listen to 400 records and know them inside and out and know all of this information. You can listen to 10,000 tunes, and that's cool, but you're worthless to me and to most musicians I know.
Yeah, I would agree, and I would say for me growing up, I mean, it was cassettes and then CDs, and I learned most of what I knew. You bought one at a time. You saved up your money for, well, even before that, you'd go to the library, you'd check something out, burn it, and then when you didn't have the money to do that. But then later, the most of the things that I learned about jazz history and about artists and about bands and little side stories was through the liner notes and through all that information and the cover, the artwork, and and I think that it's an invaluable experience to
it's a
learn.
Delivery system, and it's the way we're supposed to listen to music is, and the way it was for the first how many hundreds of thousands of years of some sort of humans, you had to be there. It's only in the last 100 years that you could take something home. We're just talking about delivery systems, and it's like, do you want to be doing this other delivery system where you end up being an idiot, or do you want to be one where you get something out of it and you have a richer life?
I remember, I think this was Hal Galper, but he has some wonderful interviews, which I'm sure you're aware of on
Nice.
YouTube. And I think it was him, and he was talking about when a new album came out when he was in school. Someone would get the album, they'd all hang out in the same dorm room and listen to the album, and then they all learned how to sing all the solos, and that's how they, ingested and learned the music, which, I think is a great communal thing and way to do that.
And what's great about that story is like any musician who's done music hears the story, and it's heartwarming. It's like, oh, good God, yeah, that's it. That's the whole experience to me. And the fact that some people who seem to be interested in music, but they don't get that, they don't. It's very sad.
Well, we still have some time here.
Yeah.
Let me see if there's any questions here. Sorry, I'm scrolling through here. Bear with me, everybody. I'm trying to see if there's any questions here. Is this a question? It's not a question. Thank you, Julio, for the kind words, though. All right, so I would like to talk a little bit, with your permission, your association with Hal Galper. How did that come about? And because you played with him for many, many years and went all over the world with him, how did that begin?
Yeah, so the last 15 years, that if I think about the whole thing, I was doing a lame gig down in Tacoma.
Hey, come on now.
But it was a great gig, and that the place and the people, from the outside, if you looked at it, you'd go, why would you drive to Tacoma on every Monday night for $30 to play for a few people? So anyway, I was doing that gig for I don't know how many years, but it was a jam session. It was cool, and Jeff Johnson came in one day, moved up from Oklahoma or wherever he was then. Anyway, so we started playing every Monday night together, and then started doing other stuff together, and then that became one of the crucial sound and relationships for me. I've got others, obviously, but that one has its place for sure. Anyway, but obviously other people hear it in Jeff also, and so he was having a lot of beautiful gigs and doing great things, and so he got hooked up with Hal up at Port Townsend in the early 90s and ended up touring with him for 10 years. And that was cool. So anyway, Jeff's back here, that band breaks up, and it's a few years later, and Hal was working on some new stuff that he was thinking of, and he heard some stuff that Jeff and I had done with John Stoll with scenes, and I think he liked the feel of it and the way it was all working, and so he just had been talking to Jeff, and so they hadn't played for 8 years or something like that. Hal flew out, came, and we hung out and played in my living room for about an hour, and then the next day we went in and recorded a record, and then that was it. Yeah.
Having such a long association with Hal, I mean, for better or worse, no matter how you stand on the Jamie Aebersold and the Play Along thing, he's partly the sound of Jamie Aebersold. He's on a lot of those albums, But what was it like being in his band and touring with him with someone with that musical history and background?
It was great. I mean, he's a character, so, and with anybody, you have your annoyances and all that kind of stuff. But when it came to music, Hal is just one of few. I mean, there's older cats who've got this thing, because I think it's more of the way they came up and their whole thing. But music, just he didn't care what he had this way that he was going to play. He didn't really care what the audience thought. Yet he knows that the audience is a part of that whole thing, and he's going to give it to them. And what we were doing was a little left of normal. And, the first little while I'd think, oh boy, they're not going to like this. But you've got to do it. You got to do the thing, and that's just letting go and letting the music happen. And that's what we did all of those years, was just, there was no conversation about you should be doing this or anything like that. It's just play. Just play. And so for me, probably just the height of like learning who I am, because this is how I play when when I'm just responding, and there's no overseer, there's no demands being made on me as far as like dancers, or they're trying to eat dinner. None of that. And just his approach to all that was very eye-opening, and being around it for that long was, it was just about music making, and it was.
There's this is more for the viewers that maybe don't know Hal and his work, but he's got several great interviews and kind of master classes and things that he's done that are on YouTube. And one of and maybe you can speak to this, that I thought was interesting is it was later in his career, after he's already been playing for years, and he was talking about he was having dreams about Bill Evans, and he learned from that he needed to reevaluate his voicings, and so he changed his voicings based on he was still studying, and he's already had the great Hal Galper, but he was still looking and evolving and changing, as most of us as musicians are trying to do. But I thought that was very interesting to hear someone from his level come and say that. Any thoughts about that, or?
Oh yeah, no, it's that process thing, right? It doesn't end. And that's where, especially being around people like that, you just realize, I mean, when I played with Don Lanfear way back, he had already made his records with Fats Navarro and, gone through all this stuff. And he was still listening to music and working on that next step, always the next step. Yeah. And so Hal, it's definitely like that. And he's doing it right now. He's 81. Yeah. And he's doing the exact same thing now. And those clinics, most of those are from, we were in Denver playing and doing clinics and doing a couple concerts. And every time we did a clinic, some kid would ask, a question about something, and how it would go, oh, geez. I don't know. Okay. And he'd go to the whiteboard, and it would be 40 minutes of just this, the thought processes, the things that, and you just see just a very serious thinker through his whole life and develop these concepts from all these different places, always on the search, always looking. Yeah. And it's pretty inspiring, especially when you just see him, he's just this gruff.
No fuss, no muss. That's what I like about that. You get the information the way that person sees it, and you can do with it what you want, but you're getting it at face value, which is, I think, amazing. That's why education, I think, a lot of times, particularly when you're studying something that, there's so much freedom in jazz, and like trying to teach someone how to be creative can be very, very challenging, because at the end it's them expressing themselves. So you got to give something that's concrete, and when you have those things from someone who knows what they're talking about, it's very, very helpful. So anyways, we're at time. That there's a lot more to cover, and we'll have to do another one of these. But so for all of our viewers watching, thank you so much. Hope you've found value in this. If you have, feel free to make a donation either via Venmo or PayPal to support the work that we're doing. Again, most of the concerts and interviews and things we present throughout the year are 100% free and open to the public. And we're going to take a short break and then come back and play some original music for you. And John, thank you so much. It's been an honor and a pleasure having you with us today.
My pleasure.
All right, one moment.